We're joined now by Matt Bruce, the author of Warriors War, his journey from serving with distinction in the Australian military to championing the use of psychedelic therapy as a healing tool is nothing short of remarkable. Welcome, Matt. It's truly an honor to have you on with us. Can you share what led you to explore psychedelics as a therapeutic tool?
Thanks, Jessica. I think that I left no stone unturned in my quest for healing after the military. So I served for 10 years in the Australian military, Special Forces, Afghanistan, served overseas with JSOC and Delta Squadron in the Middle East as well, so American Special Forces. And I think that it took a whole range of tools to be able to come back to myself and to find myself. A lot of that was like meditation, somatic modalities, fasting, healing my stomach, changing my belief systems, exploring some of the conditioning that I've received in the military. But psychedelics were quite a large part of allowing me to reprogram myself. So there's been some pretty fascinating studies out there, Jessica, saying that, magic mushrooms and psilocybin can directly impact our DNA and actually start to change the way that our serotonin receptors work in our mind. And then there's studies out there that show that our serotonin receptors can actually be directly impacted from war or from challenging childhood situations as well too. So, psychedelics has amazing possibilities for childhood trauma or tough family situations, and then also the same circumstances for veterans as well.
How can these substances facilitate the healing process for veterans who have experienced this profound trauma?
Yeah, and I guess to go more into detail in those studies, when we are experiencing harsh environments and tough conditions, our mind can actually start to close down parts of our neurotransmitters to protect us. So if our neurotransmitters and our hormones, etc., are what we're using as signals to communicate what's happening around us in our reality, what we can actually do is start to close them down. So, we can have severe impacts within our body, within our mood, within our capacity to really balance ourselves when we start to limit serotonin and the way that we're perceiving our reality. So these plants can directly work with certain receptors in the mind. So HTP2A receptor is a very classic psychedelic receptor that can be like impacted from psychedelics. And then this can actually open up our capacity to be able to perceive reality for what it is. And you can imagine that if you're a war veteran that's returning home to your family, that serotonin and oxytocin and these critical neurotransmitters and hormones that allow us to bond with our family, they allow us to perceive and find our joy and find our happiness, are quite crucial in us actually integrating back into normal life. So, psychedelics can actually go in and basically work with these receptors in the brain and open us back up to our real world. So, then I guess it comes back to us as veterans, as ex-service personnel, or even emergency services personnel to really take accountability for the environment that we have around ourselves and start to eat and look after our bodies so we can create a healthy environment that isn't actually mimicking the war zone as well, which can be quite common for soldiers to come back and then create a very chaotic or dynamic environment that can kind of re-stimulate the problems from war, I guess.
The conversation around psychedelic therapy, we know that it's evolving, right? Especially in the context of veteran mental health. How do you view these developments and what impact do you believe they could have on the future of treatment for PTSD and trauma?
Yeah, I think that they can have huge impact. That's why I'm here. I've moved all the way from Australia to try and support this and champion this movement within the United States. I think that there can be a lot of positives in the use of psychedelics and therapy, but I think there could also be a possibility of a bit of risk to the veteran community as well. And I think that creating a holistic model that supports the body and the somatics, as well as therapy and psychedelics, can actually have less risk to veterans, more impact, and more successful healing. So, it's quite common. There's a lot of traditional science out there these days that's pretty mainstream around looking at the somatics in the body, which is kind of started from, a pretty famous book called The Body Keeps a Score. And with somatics and therapy and psychedelics moved together, we could see the rate of humans increasing and moving past depression and PTSD, CPTSD, and all of these things could jump ahead in quite a strong leap and bound to what's available in the market at the moment. And you can really see this with amazing organizations like Heroic Hearts, which is a global organization that exists in America and has just started in Australia as well, where they're facilitating psychedelic journeys for veterans to heal. So, it's a pretty exciting time for veterans, for, I guess, humanity to actually understand that there is some pretty positive ways for us to heal via psychedelics.
So, building support networks is crucial for veterans undergoing healing. So, how can the broader community enhance their support for veterans, both engaged in psychedelic therapy and otherwise?
I guess the best way that the community can support veterans is actually to be the healthiest, healed version of themselves. If we have strong communities, when veterans come back from war, that strong community can kind of take on that veteran and support him and maybe have conversations with him, reflect things back to him. And, if we have a strong community and somebody comes in with trauma, there's a possibility that as a society, as a, maybe like the old tribal system, we can lift them up. And it might only be a few conversations, a few reflections from a leader or a male who's really healthy in his body, in his mind, to actually able to, point him in the right direction. I think with today's society that everyone is so busy, people might be struggling in their own mental health as well too, that as a community, as a society, we can't actually help support the veterans. So, the classic behaviors and the behavioral aspects when we come back from war, drinking and, certain levels of aggression, etc., are somewhat nearly tolerated in the modern society these days, that they're kind of normalized. So, if a veteran comes back and comes into these roles, well, that's pretty common across all of masculinity these days. So, if we had a higher standard of masculinity, if we had more opportunities for veterans to come and connect with not necessarily ex-veterans, but other healthy men within the community, that there could be a great opportunity to support them.
Well, that's some great information. And before we go, what are some common misconceptions about psychedelic therapy that you can tell us about?
I'd say that obviously there's been quite an information campaign around psychedelics, namely psilocybin, that it is mostly for hallucinogenic and a trip perspective. I was just down in Venice Beach the other day, and I walked into a mushroom shop, and the shop was illegally selling psilocybin as under the name of another mushroom that's legal. And the misconception is that these plants are here to trip or to hallucinate or to go out and party on. They are a lot more special than that. There is a huge opportunity for people to really rebond and repattern some of the critical aspects of the childhood, the military service, the trauma, etc. And when done in the right setting and with the right support people and the right environment, you can have very profound healing experiences. And the setting, the self-setting is very, very important for humans to get the most out of these plants. And I'd say that if you are under the belief system that you should be going out and drinking and partying or having shrooms on the weekend, maybe you could just check in with your value system and see if that's really in integrity with you, that these plants should really be supporting people to be the best versions of themselves, and not something that we should be just tripping on the weekend on.
Yeah, well, that's some great information, Matt. Thank you so very much for joining us. We look forward to having you on our show again.
Thanks, Jessica.
I really thought it was so interesting when he brought up how important it is for us to have a strong community that the veterans can come back to kind of help support
I
them.
feel like people don't say that enough
Mm-hmm.
for our veterans, especially. I mean, they've done so much.
I know.
We tend to forget.
It's like for our country,
Yes.
and it's like what is the
For our
least
freedom.
exactly. So it's like I feel like what is the least we can do for them, right? When they've literally put their lives on the line for us.
Yeah, some really good stuff. Hopefully, we'll have Matt back on.
Yeah, and but his point about the community overall, like I feel like we need strong community for all of us, like
Right.
because we're really all in this together.
Yeah, but I think it's the whole thing of us just being so so stuck with behind the computer or behind the phone that we've lost that sense of community, actually.
Right, and the pandemic certainly didn't
Oh,
help, right?
no, it didn't.
We just got isolated in our own little places.
And comfortable being isolated, which is the scary part.
That's so true. So get out there and make a connection.
Yeah, also connect